singing pretty soon? Okay, no, you don't want that. All right, well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for braving the elements to be here. You courageous few. I know the audience online, so thank you for joining us online. My name is Stanley Dumernay. I'm the Executive Director of Freetown Village, and it's my pleasure to welcome you tonight. Tonight, we are continuing with our conversations in Indiana African American History and Culture series. And so, for those of you who do not know, Freetown Village is a living history museum with the mission to educate the public about African American history and culture in Indiana. We've been fulfilling this mission since 1982, and the state of Indiana and the Midwest with at least one of our 20 plus different educational outreach programs. Go to our webpage at freetownvillage.org to see the listing of all our sessions in this series and other Freetown Village programs and events, including our life-changing summer day camp. I want to thank our sponsors for their support, for helping us to have this program, beginning with the Black Heritage Preservation Program at the Indiana Landmarks, Indiana Humanities, IU Indianapolis Africana Studies Department, the Joseph Taylor branch of ASALA, and the Associations for the Study of African American Life and History. Over the past 42 years, we have touched the lives of over 1 million individuals through our programs. If you would like to support us in reaching the next 1 million participants, go to our webpage at freetownvillage.org to contribute. You can also let us know if you'd like to volunteer or serve on one of our committees. Our speaker tonight is Keisha Tandy. Keisha Tandy is the curator of social history at the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites. In this position, she researches, collects artifacts, and presents content and exhibits. She has curated several exhibits focusing on significant events and individuals in Indiana history. Keisha served as the primary researcher for the permanent experience Souls Seeking Safety, bringing Indiana's Underground Railroad experience to life at the Levi and Catherine Coffin State Historic Site in Fountain City, Indiana. It opened in December 2016. And also Major Taylor, Fastest Cyclist in the World, 2022. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in American History, Master of Library Science, and Master of Public History from Indiana Purdue University, Indianapolis, now Indiana University, Indianapolis. Keisha is an associate faculty in the Luddy School of Informatics and Computing, teaching library and information science. Keisha was part of the inaugural cohort of Black Leadership Plus Legacies, Inc. She serves on the boards of CICOA, Aging and In-Home Solutions, and the Society of Indiana Archivists. Very impressive. We're delighted to have you tonight, Keisha. Her presentation tonight, entitled She Has Done What She Could, will be on Ada Harris, who lived between 1866 and 1927 and served the community of Norwood beyond the classroom building, a legacy of community uplift and service. And so I would like to let you know that for us to continue to bring quality programs like this, we encourage you all to complete a short evaluation. And for those of you here in the audience, there will be a QR code on the screen at the end of the program for you to quickly respond. And for those of you who are following online, you will be sent a link to complete. These evaluations are a concrete way for us to measure the impact our programs are having with our audiences and communicate that to our funders. Before Keisha begins her presentation, we would like to share with you a short video clip produced by Freetown Village for our Black History Moments series. Tonight's video features the Cordon Colored School. You can see it again on the Freetown Village YouTube page, along with other videos researched by Eunice Trotter and produced by Freetown Village. At the conclusion of the video, you will hear from Keisha.
This is a little-known Black History moment brought to you by Freetown Village.
Corydon Colored School was the only school for African Americans for decades in Corydon, Indiana. Built for elementary and high school students in 1891, the first student graduated in 1897. Many of the students were descendants of about 100 formerly enslaved African Americans brought to the Corydon area from North Carolina. One of the descendants was Leora Brown. After graduating from the colored school in 1923, Brown went to Indianapolis, where she studied education at Madam Blaker's Teachers College. Brown returned to Corydon to teach at the school. She taught from 1924 to 1950 when the school closed. Leora Brown's niece, Maxine Brown, purchased the abandoned property in 1987 and renovated it. The school was renamed the Leora Brown School and is used today for community functions. It is listed on the Indiana Register of Historic Places and is part of the Indiana African American Heritage Trail.
For more information about Freetown Village, visit us at freetownvillage.org.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. I appreciate you all being in the audience. I look forward to discussing and actually honoring the legacy of Ada B. Harris. She was much more than an educator. She was someone who worked. I like to call her the wonderful worker because she was always working. And as we're going through our discussion tonight, our conversation, I would ask each of you to kind of keep a running list of all the things that you see her doing. So maybe that's a worker, that's educator, your list will grow. So if you will do that with me tonight, just kind of keep a running list of Ada B. Harris. So you see this image here. This is an image that is from the Legacy Theater at the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites. And the quote there reads, "My greatest ambition is for my race. I want to see my people succeed. I want to see them have an equal chance." And this quote is from the Indianapolis Star. It's from the year 1909. And at the time, I did not know very much about Ada B. Harris. This space opened in 2003. In about 2001, 2002, I was introduced to Ada Harris by Miss Donna Stokes Lucas, who is a mentor and a friend. And she shared with me the story of Ada B. Harris. And since that time, she has been someone that I have continuously researched, because although she had been written about in one article, most of the information that I was able to find about her actually comes from newspapers. And if any of you know me, you know that I love to search newspapers. It's the source that I go to immediately. I see someone saying, yes, me too. That is the place that I always start for my research. And so I started looking for her and trying to find more and more information about this wonderful woman. And when I was asked about my availability to speak tonight, I knew that I wanted to speak about her. And so from around 2001 up until this day, I've continued to learn more and more about her. And more recently, learning more about Norwood and the community that she worked and did a lot. Now, she was an asset to the city of Indianapolis. And as we talk tonight, you'll see how in telling her story, we actually tell the story of early Black life in Indianapolis. So this is one of the images that was in the newspaper from 1909, just seeing her sitting there stately, just thinking about, I think she's pondering the things that she has done. So I want to begin with her death certificate. Now, why would I begin with her death certificate? As I said, I didn't know very much about her, and I for a long time, I was not sure of her exact birthday. I love sources and citations. And so when I found her death certificate, I was able then to put together her birthday, August 15th, 1866, her death date being September 12th, 1927, listing her employment, her parents, and then the informant. And so this was such a great resource and a set of information because as we go throughout this talk, I'll spend a lot of time actually talking about the sources that I use to help pull her story together. So now we know when she was born because there were other sources that give different dates, and that is not a surprise. So we know that she graduated from high school here in Indianapolis. She graduated from the Indianapolis High School. Now, she was born in Kentucky, and she would arrive in Indianapolis, and she would have her education here and graduate from high school. And as you'll see here, we'll see if I can use the pointer. Oh, okay, you see essay. Um, And then if you come down here again, you have essay, Mrs. Harris. So as part of her graduation exercises, the program exercises, she was a part of that. And I want you to know that she's giving an essay. So that again adds to the things that she could do. She is someone who would be a writer as well. She would also be a traveler. She was someone who would go to London for the Paris Exposition in 1900. It would be recorded in the Indianapolis Recorder, and she would actually stay there for a little while. So the previous newspaper article was from June of 1900. This is from September 8th of 1900. And you'll note the title says A Colored Woman's Trip. And she dined with the mayor of London and saw the queen. Now, if you go into the article, that doesn't necessarily mean she met with the queen. That means she saw the queen. So very distinct that they're putting in there. What I love about this article is that you have an image of her, and then you have this young woman who by this time is a teacher. She's an educator, and she's serving in the Norwood schools, and she's traveling. She's traveling with the Christian Endeavors, which was an organization that was started to have support for student work in congregation. Student discipleship is how it has been described. And so she's traveling. And it's always so interesting for me when I find pieces like this of people who are traveling and traveling very early. And this is a young woman who's going with the group, and she stayed for a while, and her travels are being recorded in the Indianapolis newspaper. So the Recorder and in the news. And she would serve as a teacher and a principal. She was a teacher in the Norwood School for over 21 years. She was a principal, and this is one of her programs from a 1905 graduation at the Harriet Beecher Stowe School. Now, initially when she started as a teacher, the school was called the Norwood School, and eventually it would be named the Harriet Beecher Stowe School. And this piece, I wanted to share it because you'll see that it has listed, and I know it's not the clearest, Ada B. Harris Principal, 1905. And then I wanted to also highlight here Mr. John Hardrick, and then recitation of John Hardrick. As I said, when we look at this, we're going to see a lot of individuals who have had recognition in a part of Indianapolis Black history. And I want to bring him up because John Hardrick, as many of you know, was an artist who made his entire career here in Indianapolis. He has significant works looking at landscapes and looking at still lifes, but he also painted Black life in Indianapolis, many portraits. And so she was one of his teachers, and she was very supportive of his work. And so being able to find this piece where she is helping the community, being a part of the uplift is very important. And so as we look at Ms. Harris and the work that she did, we know that she had so many opportunities and she made opportunities for others. It is in Norwood because she lived in other locations in Indianapolis, many of those locations being in the Ransom Place neighborhood. She would eventually end in Norwood at 1120 Earhart Street, and she would live there for about 20 years in that same address. And it is in this community that Ada Harris fulfilled what would become her life work. She worked as a teacher and would later become the principal at Harriet Beecher Stowe School. But her work in the community went beyond her dedication to teaching. And in one of those areas of how her work went beyond the job, the duty, the responsibility of teaching was in her efforts to have a gymnasium for the Norwood youth. And in a 1907 Indianapolis Recorder article, it talks about the headquarters for the boys' gymnasium and how the efforts what they were trying to get. And it was said that in the Indianapolis Freedom that Miss Ada B. Harris, principal of the Norwood School, has undertaken to provide a building for the suburb of Norwood to be used as a gymnasium, a reading room, and baths for the young colored men of the community. The plan, which was its origin is the Boys Club, was organized in October of 1903 and was given the name of the Lookout Club. The object of the organization was to improve the morals and behavior of the boys. And so you can see she is really taking it upon herself to help and uplift in her community. There is a reference in an Indianapolis Recorder article that says, Ada Harris, promoter, cordially invite the mothers with their children to take a car ride out to the beautiful shady retreat on Sunday afternoons. This is the family pleasure grounds. And so she's not only making an opportunity for these young men, but also for families. And I want to highlight a couple things in this article. As you see, this is a longer article, and this was the beginning of her efforts to try to get an actual physical building. And what was so wonderful about this is that, so you see H.L. Sanders. H.L. Sanders had a business on Indiana Avenue. He sold gents clothing and also women's clothing. He did the lab coats for the dentists and the doctors, and his business was very successful. He's donating. Archie Greathouse, also a business owner on Indiana Avenue. You have Beulah W. Porter, Dr. Porter. And so you see all these individuals who are helping, not necessarily living in Norwood, but who are helping to share and to help to build this gymnasium. You'll see Joseph Ward, Dr. Joseph Ward. But then you also see this gentleman here, Carter Temple Sr. And I'm sure if you can read this, then you probably see some more names that you recognize. Lucas Willis, Undertaker, also one of the individuals. But these were some that I see in my research all the time and that I'm aware of. But I wanted to take note of Carter Temple because Carter Temple is a gentleman who came to Indiana. He had born enslaved. He came to Indiana and his family, he would live there, and then his family would live at 550 Minerva Street for many years. And I'm not sure, Kyle, can you click that for me? Okay, so they would live at 550 Minerva Street for many years. And so I taught a class with Dr. Paul Mullins, which many of you know, and he did the research for this address and this property. But in that class, we looked at many different individuals who had come to Indiana and who had lived in the neighborhood along the canal, the Indiana Avenue neighborhood, and in that residence. And so Carter Temple, his name was in my brain because I had remembered him from the course. But what's interesting about him, he had a son who was in the United States Colored Troops. He had a grandson who would serve in the Spanish-American War. And then he would have a great-grandson who would attend John Herron School of Art and would become an artist. And as you scroll down, you'll be able to see some of the history. And the one son being in the police in his uniform. Scroll down a little more, and then the son, the great grandson, being an artist. So again, this whole idea of looking at Ada Harris' life and the work that she is doing, and being able to talk a little bit more about what is happening in the Indianapolis community. So we can go back to the PowerPoint. Thank you. Okay. As part of the Boys Club, of course, Ada B. Harris serving as the director, you will see that they had a Sunday forum. And as part of this Sunday forum, they were coming together. Notice the model that she's using, lifting as we climb. And so in that, again, this whole idea of uplifting the community, building the community. This is 1909. She's already in service to individuals. And you can see they're coming together, they're having this meeting very much about the culture and making sure that individuals were coming together. I want to point out a couple of the people who are part of this service. Reverend Pinnock, the church being in the Norwood neighborhood and him being such a large part of that community, but then also the piano selection with Naomi Hardrick. And again, going back to the Hardrick family, Ms. Harris had taught Naomi as well. And so you can, again, just beginning to see these various connections, not only between Norwood, but education, building up young men. I wanted to share this image here because this is when she was able to get the building. This is what the interior of the building looked like. But if you notice the title, you'll notice in the title that she's also, they're planning maybe how can we make the clubhouse better? Never stopping to rest, continuing on, making a way so that things can improve and be better. This is the work that Ms. Harris was doing. And so again, this was in 1909. So she's raising money in 1906. By 1909, they have the physical structure. They're hosting different programs and coming together for various meetings. It was one thing that was really interesting about this image. You will see a piano, and then you also see the different flags. So if you have our piano, and then if you look up here, we have the flags. And that's interesting because we're going to look at an article where she talks about the patriotic young men. And so seeing how this is displayed in the place where they were coming together is important for later articles that talk about her story. And here is the 1910 article. And it says, "What is the junior garden? People are becoming so interested, and many are asking the above question. It is simply a story of life depicted by 200 children. They have songs in their hearts and songs on their lips. The soil is prepared. The seeds are sown. The rain comes afterward sunshine. In this garden spring up weeds and flowers. The weeds are pulled up and cast away. The flowers are allowed to grow and scatter blessings. To the thousand of people who will come to see this production, take the lesson given. In your garden of life, are you preparing rich soil? Are you sowing good or bad seed in your community?" Notice she's still speaking about community. "Do you cause the rain that falls in your life to give gloom or freshness to others? Are you scattering sunshine everywhere you go? A smile, a kind look, a helping hand, a word of sympathy to the sick or afflicted, a pat on the shoulder, a kind good morning and good evening. All these emanating from the heart are rays of sunshine. In the junior garden are patriotic young Americans. These are the invincible Flanner Guild boys who will salute the flag and bow their heads in reference to the Grand Army of the Republic, Ada B. Harris." And I wanted to bring this one out also because did you notice the language that she's using and the questions that she's asking? You've read those in different ways and very much looking toward the Bible. She definitely has that here. But this is also one of the only places that I've seen where she's writing. Because, like I said, I've been researching her for a while, and I will continue to research her because I would love to be able to find some of the articles that she's written. So this is the closest that I've been able to find. So I wanted to make sure to share that this evening. Also, with the open air meeting for the Boys Club of Norwood, this is in October of 1910. And I wanted to share this because it shows her being accountable. Notice she says, this means is to let the public know the standing financially, the prospective aim, and the aspirations of all who have helped Miss Ada B. Harris in the realization of her life's work. So she's being accountable to the people who have helped her. And I just find that to be incredible. You know, that she knew to take this action. And so accountable is another one of the things that she is and what she has done. I want you to also notice G.L. Knox. That would have been George Knox, and he is on her board of managers. So this is someone who is dedicated, committed, and actually was very much about the business of making sure that her organization was together. And we can see all of that here. And I just find that to be very powerful for this woman during this time period. She was also a club woman. And when I think about telling the story of Black life in Indianapolis, one of the places that I also go outside of newspapers are what were the women doing? What clubs were they active in? And so I want to stop here and just note that the work of Dr. Earlene Ray Ferguson. And this was one of her early articles, The Women's Improvement Club of Indianapolis, Black Women Pioneers in Tuberculosis Work. And this was from the Indiana Magazine of History in 1988. And this is probably one of the first articles that was a secondary source that I saw Ada Harris being written about in. She had Dr. Ferguson also has another article that mentions her and the work of the club women. But I wanted to mention her because this was a great early start to being able to tell her story, to being able to find some additional sources through footnotes and just being able to learn a little bit more about Ada B. Harris. And because she was working in the Women's Improvement Club. And the Women's Improvement Club actually started off as a literary club, and then it was organized into this club. And they did a lot of work with helping the community of Indianapolis, not just Norwood. And so this is actually from the Women's Improvement Club papers at the Indiana Historical Society. Now, these papers are not digitized yet, but the image is from the Class 900 post. That is a blogger who does a lot of amazing Indianapolis focused research. His name is Ed, and I do not want to mess up his last name, but he just published a book on vanishing Indianapolis, and his blog, Class 900, is full of incredible research, wonderful research. And so this picture was there. And you will see Ada Harris as one of the members. But also for those who are here and who can, maybe some of you are seeing some of the names that you recognize. Okay, so I'm going to point out above, so we have Ada Harris at number 10. We have Lillian Fox. We have Ida Bryant, Daisy Brabham, and then we have Stella Ward here, and we have Beulah Porter, and we have Rose Hummins. So hopefully some of those names are coming back to you. You recognize some of those names. So you can again see just how important the work that she was doing, but not only as an individual, but as the work that she's doing with club women. And what I love about this also is look at the addresses. So we have North Street, we have Missouri, we have California Street, California, Indiana Avenue. These are all places that we recognize in that area. Now, I haven't gone to see how many of the houses are still there or not there, but just knowing that they were there and in the community, I think this is such a helpful record and sources of records, but then also it just gives us, again, another documentation of the work that she was doing. And not only her, but these wonderful club women. And she would also be someone, so we're looking at her as teacher, principal, organizer, but she also would be someone who would help to put together a library. So she's also being a librarian. As you look down at the last paragraph here, and I'll read for our benefit. A colored community named Norwood near Indianapolis is to have a public library with about 1,000 books. Ms. Ada B. Harris, principal of the local school, has been chief promoter of the project. And the citizens themselves have cleaned and remodeled the building, while local firms have given much of the furniture. And this is from The Crisis being the magazine of the NAACP. This is from November 1912. And so we know, what I liked about this is that she's listed as the chief promoter. So another attribute of her is that she's a chief promoter. And you think about her gathering 1,000 books. And so I had to stop and think about that. Could I gather 1,000 books? And then I thought, and I will say I am a trained librarian. And then I thought about, if I got together all of my people, yes, we could do that. And you can see how she is collecting and bringing them together. She's collecting money. She's being accountable for that money. And now she's collecting books for her community. So she is putting together a library that will help her community. And I love that. Now, I will say that this library was an independent library. It was not a library that would have been part of the system, but it was an independent library. And if you are someone who likes research and learning about libraries, please check out Michelle Fenton, also a librarian here in Indianapolis. She has a blog and it's about little known librarian facts. And so you can find out additional information about her through that. And so going to another newspaper, we're up to around 1918. We're in Norwood. And I wanted to share this because going back to the idea of looking at Indianapolis, but then also looking at ways that she's incorporating her community and this idea that she had her students looking at ways to benefit and make their community better and stronger. And so this is an emancipation celebration to be given at Norwood. And it was going to be a flag raising in the Gymnasium Park in Norwood. And Dr. Sumner A. Furness, City Councilman, would be the master of ceremonies. And this celebration, which promises to be among the most elaborate of the kind given among the colored people. And this was put together, and it was helped to put together by Miss Ada B. Harris of the City Public Schools, is the director. And so again, now she's directing, she's helping to bring about all of these different activities. And I always have to stop when I see anything that talks about emancipation. A lot of the research that I do looks at the United States colored troops. And as I was doing research on that, I followed up afterwards to see how were individuals celebrating different things. And we find in newspapers where they're having very early having different activities and celebrations, whether it be at Bethel AME or in other locations well before this. This one is at 1918, but seeing this continued celebration and having this. And again, we see her there active and directing and making all of this happen. But something that also was so wonderful about her is that she was a suffragette. She was someone who worked for citizenship and getting people the right to vote. And she's doing this in 1919 when she does not yet have the right to vote. So she's organizing among the women in Norwood. And it says, a citizenship school under the direction of Miss Ada Harris will be open in Norwood Thursday, October 16th at the library building. The program will include community singing, a general outline of the work by Miss Harris, an address by Mrs. Frank J. and we'll leave the last name, of this city. The school is to be in keeping with the requests of the franchise league of this city, and the colored women of Norwood have been organized under the name of the Norwood Women's Franchise League. This is 1919. She's organizing women in Norwood in preparation of getting the vote. Ada Harris is amazing. So she is doing all of this and they're coming together. So this was her school and citizenship, and this is in October of 1919. And then in September of 1920, you see that she's using every opportunity that she has to talk about registration and voting. And as I was thinking about this, I was like, she was already getting, having her registration drives, her voter drives this very early. And it says, Miss Ada B. Harris addressed the Parent Teacher Association at Rushville on Thursday on registration and voting. Registration and voting. Again, she's just getting the opportunity to vote, but she's making sure that she is getting others interested and involved and sharing opportunities. And then one last that speaks to her idea of organizing and helping with a citizenship school. And this one does note that this is from the Indianapolis News, and it notes that this is a nonpartisan citizenship school held this week at the YWCA Recreational Center in Northwest Street. Recognize that address? Okay, I see some heads shaking. So she's going to be speaking at the Phyllis Wheatley YWCA. And again, it says under the direction of Miss Ada B. Harris, was attended by about 100 women. It makes me so excited to see that women were ready. They're ready to vote. The aim of the school has been to inform the women on the principles of the leading political parties and the issues of the campaign. Again, she is a worker. Now, this one speaks to her just speaking in the community. This is from the Indianapolis News, and you'll note I highlighted here Democratic women speakers. And then as you come down, you'll see we have Ada B. Harris, colored, of Indianapolis, and she is scheduled to speak as well about issues of getting out, voting, and why it's important, and all of those things. And what is interesting about this one is that you also see the name W.A. Gaines. And no matter what I'm researching, if I can connect it to some other work that I'm doing, I'm always going to try. So we have Ada B. Harris, and we have W.A. Gaines. Now, I remembered W.A. Gaines because there was a funeral home funeral director in Evansville, Indiana. And so this is an image from the W.A. Gaines Company in Evansville, Indiana. So she's allowing us to see in the work that's being written about her, work that other people are doing, other Black people in the state of Indiana. And so it's just a great opportunity to share that connection between her work that she's doing and speaking, as well then also connecting us to W.A. Gaines in Evansville, Indiana. She was also someone who was an advocate and who would testify. So in 1920, she would testify as they are trying to ask for a 10-cent fare for city traffic. Now, Norwood had been annexed in 1912. And so this is in 1920, and this is what it says. Miss Ada B. Harris, colored school teacher of Norwood, testified that a population of about 1,075 depends on the interurban line, and that the population of the district is increasing. She said most of the residents own their property, and I want to stop there. Note, own their property, and are working people, own their property and are working people, very important, on whom a 10-cent fare would be a hardship. She made a special plea for consideration of the conditions. So she's going forth. she's testifying, she's trying to make sure that the people in her community, the people that she is serving and helping, that they are not going to be unduly hurt by something that's coming there. And it's just, again, we're seeing the many ways that she is active and she's participating and she's trying to make things better for the people of Norwood. And I just wanted to add this one here. This is in 1921, and it just notes that, so this is the Women's Improvement Club. So we're going to go through this because there are a bunch of interesting individuals here. So the Women's Improvement Club, they're meeting in the home of Frances Berry Costin. And she was also someone who worked for women to get the right to vote, but she was a writer for the Indianapolis News. So she wrote for the Indianapolis News, so another reporter. And then you have Miss Ada Harris, vice president. And then you have Mrs. F.B. Ransom. We know Miss Ransom. And then you have just other individuals who are there and what they are doing to help in their community. So you can see a checklist, a check of the list with that of the worker for the club showed that all mothers but 4 were on the friendly visitors list. So they're helping different mothers because it's the Mothers Aid Society. So you can see the different ways that they are helping within the Women's Improvement Club. And this club, again, started off as a literary club and then expanded, and they were the ones who were very active to help establish the Oak Hill Open Air Park here in Indianapolis. So this may be one of the pieces that made me smile the most as I was learning about Miss Ada Harris. So she was never, it doesn't seem like she was ever one to shy away. So this is for, they needed, and they wanted to get more fire protection. And before going into the conference with the contractors, the board received a delegation of about 150 members of the East Prospect Street Improvement Association, who presented a petition signed by 1,000 persons asking for water for fire protection, extension of the Prospect Street car line from Keystone Avenue to Sherman Drive, and domestic electric service in the territory roughly bounded by Keystone, Bethel, and Southeastern Avenues and Sherman Drive. This section comprised of Norwood and Lovetown, chiefly populated by Negroes, and a new white residential neighborhood to the southeast. And I'll stop there because one of the things as I've been learning more about Ada B. Harris, I've also been learning more about Norwood and also about Lovetown. I would say I knew absolutely nothing about Lovetown until in the last couple of years when all of that information has been coming out. And so this made me smile because it's like, again, these connectings not only of people, but of locations. And the delegation was come and they had individuals come. And this really made me smile. It was significantly mentioned to the board. I'm going to highlight that here. It was significantly mentioned to the board that of the 3,000 inhabitants of the section, 1,000 are voters. That made me stop. Yeah, that just this idea of me seeing that written 1922 Indiana, taking note of 1,000 of them being voters. And then this made Miss Ada B. Harris happy as well. Miss Ada B. Harris, Negro school teacher, was so pleased with the reception accorded to the delegation, which was chiefly Negroes, that she wanted to lead a prayer or song. But the board politely asked her to refrain. And I just thought, well, she was praying in her head and singing in her heart. So just the excitement of like, again, she's working, she's doing all of these things. And I want to point this out here because this will come back. This idea, you remember she talks about land ownership and owning land, and then you can see the lots that she's going to get again in this Prospect Street area. And this, it's always interesting to find the amount of information that is in newspapers, especially as it pertains to property and shifting of property. And so I will leave this here so you can see the different lots that she's going to get. That's going to become more important as we move forward. And then we're back to her being a leader in the political ring. So again, we have community members. Yeah, okay. Other community members, but I wanted to bring this up here because you have Democratic women prepared to take a hand in the political game today with the announcement of a series of afternoon and night meetings over the city. An open air meeting will be held at Fountain Square Saturday night, and then followed by daily gatherings. And this was going to be Miss Ada B. Harris. So she's part of that committee again. How do we connect with the city? How are we making sure our voices are heard? And she was there to be able to do that. But in all these things, she's still trying to bring about information, trying to share things, but she would not be done. One of the things that she did is she went back to school. She went back to school. She went to Butler. You can see her. Oh, she is a older woman by this time. This is from the 1925 Butler University yearbook. And she's in the pen and pencil and press clubs. So again, this idea of writing, and this gives me more evidence that she is a writer. I haven't been able to find much about her being a writer, but there are pieces of evidence that just keep revealing themselves. So hopefully one day in the future, I'll be able to find that information. I just haven't found it yet, but I do hope to be able to find that. So imagine you've already been teaching for many years. Remember, she graduated from high school in 1888, and she immediately is teaching, but she goes back to school and she goes back to get a degree, and she is going to get her degree. She's getting a Bachelor of Arts in Education, and her graduation from Butler University, June 14th, 1926. So it's just, I find it amazing that she was able to take that time to be able to go in and to go back to school and to receive an education. And what I put the individual who helped me find this information up, because I'm sure many of you in the audience are researchers and who depend on librarians. And I just wanted to know that she went in and found the information, Megan McKee over at the Irwin Library at Butler University. And when I've gone back to ask for help, she has continued to help. And so I always tell people, get to know your librarians because they can be very helpful. Your librarians, archivists, all those individuals that have information, because they're going to know their collections. I know this is not the best image, but you can see here, Ada B. Harris, Education, Indianapolis, candidates for the degree, Bachelor of Arts. Of course, I've cut everything out. And then over here, Monday, June 14th, 1926, on the campus. So always wanting to make sure that we document everything and being able to find information. And then it's interesting because the recorder would then also have the information of the graduating class, including the additional women that were there. So you see Miss Ada here in her graduation picture, and then you have Miss Dora Oman Atkins, Miss Lucille Stokes, and Miss Hazel Jackson. And then what is interesting, I know you can't read this down here, so I will read it the best that I can. It says, this part down here, Miss Harris is a prominent club woman, social worker, and former teacher. So again, all the things that she could do. She is listed as a prominent club woman, a social worker, and a teacher. So she's just having all these wonderful ways that she is having an impact, not only in Norwood, but in Indianapolis. So she's definitely a woman of impact as well. So Miss Harris would die on September 12th, 1927. And the only obituary that I can find was actually from the Indianapolis Recorder. So I'm going to read the obituary from the Recorder. Mrs. Ada Harris, old settler, dies. Mrs. Harris, an old settler of the community, died at her home in Norwood early Monday morning. Mrs. Harris had suffered 3 strokes. She suffered a stroke in Rockville, Indiana last year, and then one in the Norwood Library some time ago, and the third last Tuesday, which she was unable to survive. And it lists her as being 61 years of age, that she was born in Newport, Kentucky. It lists her as the daughter of Lawrence and Emma. We know that her mother's name was John and her mother's name was Anna. I'm sorry. Her father's name on her death certificate is listed as John. And it says that Mrs. Harris was prominent in the women's clubs and political and civic movements. She was a graduate of Butler College, a teacher in the city schools for 27 years, and well known for her civic activities. At one time, Mrs. Harris made a trip to Europe, visiting Paris and other interesting points. She was well known in the city and beloved by the people of Norwood. And I love that expression. She was beloved by the people of Norwood for her civic activities. She was instrumental in having the school facilities improved in that community. So now she's also instrumental. She is beloved by the people in the community. And you just see as how active she is. She's described as a prominent in women's clubs and activities, political and civic movements. She's well known for her activities. She was well known in the city, and she was beloved by the people of Norwood. And she was instrumental in having the school facilities improved in that community. And that was worth repeating because it just really helps to summarize all that she could do. And not only what she could do, but what she did do. And it is interesting because the undertaker who would serve as for her body was C.M.C. Willis. Many of you will recognize that name. And he was the first Black funeral director and owner in Indiana. And he had graduated from school in 1895. And what's interesting about him is that he joined organizations to encourage African-American business growth, such as the Negro Business League, and to help to establish the Afro-American Realty Company. And again, this whole idea of we're making connections with people, the Black people of Indianapolis, who are helping one another and who are helping to build the community and to make a way and make better for the people in the community. But one of the things that has been most interesting about the research that I've done and the things that I found has actually been her will. And so you see the will here, and I'm going to read some different parts of the will here. And one of the things that we spend a lot of time talking about is this idea of legacies. What is the legacy that you will leave? And I would argue, I would say that you would all probably agree with me that she had a legacy of being active, of being a worker. She was constantly doing. So she was able to leave a historical legacy, but she was also able to leave a financial legacy. And that's important. She signed her will January 26, 1927. She died in September of 1927. $250 was left to Miss Ida Curtis of Rockville, Indiana. Let's see where it is. Rockville, Indiana. So this is the paragraph that talks about her there. And it was in recognition and full payment of her services and kindness to me. Harris, like it said in the newspaper, has suffered one of her attacks in Rockville. And in my mind, it was Miss Curtis who helped her to recover after that attack. Now, I don't have full evidence that this is the case, but this is a strong argument that Miss Curtis was there to help her. She left $1 to John Tolliver, And this is one of the remaining questions about her relationship with John. And then she left her library, which I thought was so special, to her little cousin, Beatrice Patton. And she also left her best upright piano and a music cabinet. Now, if we go back to the image from the interior of the boys, there was a piano. So music was very important in her life. She left the certain piece of real estate, which I own and located on North California Street, to Mrs. Susan Harper. All of her properties associated with 1120 Earhart Street, her home and the location of the library, plus 3 lots on Madeira Street. So you remember the small newspaper clipping with the lots? She left those lots on Madeira Street to the city of Indianapolis. The proceeds from any sale of the property was to go, as per a desire, a playground and recreational purpose in the portion of Indianapolis known as Norwood. And it is my desire that any playground or recreational center maintained in Norwood shall be known as the Ada B. Harris Recreation Center and shall be maintained especially for the use and benefit of colored children. I find this to be amazing. She planned for the future of the children of the community and left the means for the legacy so that they would be able to do that. And this is her will that provides all of that information. And if you can see here, I know that's not the best. It says the Ada B. Harris Recreational Center right in her will. We can just all clap at that. Like, this woman was able to do that. So it's through this, and Ada, in her own words, she said, "My field has been small in Norwood." And I would argue that her field was actually pretty large in Norwood. But she says, "My field has been small in Norwood, but it has been plenty large enough for my abilities. At least I have spent my life for my race." And I find it, again, this idea, and this is from the 1909 article, that she was very aware of what she was doing, not doing any of these things for accolades or for praise, but because they were just simply needing to be done. But she recognized that, and that she said, "At least I have spent my life for my race." And we have shown the evidence that she has indeed done that. So we can see all the things that Miss Ada B. Harris was. But there was one thing that just made me really smile. There were a lot of things about Ada B. Harris that smiled. But if any of you know me, I don't need a reason to talk about Major Taylor. Major Taylor is, of course, born and raised in Indianapolis, and he would become the first international Black superstar athlete. And he did this on a bicycle. So as I was doing research for Major Taylor, and when I go back, I realized that Dr. Erling Ray Ferguson had already written about this, but it had been years of separation in my research. And so when you go back and you look, and I find this, and it's a party of bicyclists headed by Mrs. Ada Harris, Grace Lucas, and Ruth Higgs gave a bicycle dance at the home of Mr. and Mrs. F. Brown in Norwood last evening. Music was furnished by Carter Smith's orchestra. Now, I will tell you, I did look up bicycle dance. I still have no clue what it is. But what I do know is they were cycling and they knew how to ride bikes. And they were coming together in celebration and having fun. And this is 1896. This is the same year that Major Taylor would become a professional cyclist. He would have he had been racing around Indianapolis and Indiana and other places, but he would become a professional cyclist in December of 1896. And you can see Miss Ada Harris is ahead of her time. She's a cyclist and she's joined by friends. And that was really fun to find. And then you see that they're having friends over, and notice it's at 5 o'clock breakfast. And this was Ada Harris providing this 5 o'clock breakfast. So she's also an early riser, but I'm sure that come from all the years of being this is early in her school teaching years, but being up to get ready for school. But notice it says, after the party, their 5 o'clock breakfast, after their 5 o'clock breakfast, the party mounted their wheels and went to Millersville. So I just think it's so sweet, you know, and all the things that she's doing and providing the community, she's also finding a place where she can have joy and fun in riding a bike and having that freedom to be able to go as she rides her bike. And this is 1897. And I want to point out that these are from the Indianapolis Freeman. And if you remember going back to the open air meeting where it lists her board of managers, one of them was George Knox, who at one time was the publisher of the Indianapolis Freedom. So as we have looked at Miss Ada B. Harris, there are a lot of things that we have been able to describe her as, a lot of worthy things that we have been able to describe her. And so as I looked at this, and I will tell you, this is when you realize that I work at a museum and we have wonderful graphic designers and exhibit designers who would have probably made this a lot better. But as I can laugh at myself. As I was working on this and I was pulling all these things together, these are all the things that she was doing. Now, some of these are things that other people described her as, like the chief promoter. She was described as the chief promoter in the crisis article for the NAACP crisis. She was a librarian and she's helping to bring together the book. She was a teacher and a caregiver. She was a student. She went back to school as a much older person. She was a public speaker as she was speaking at different events for looking at voting and registration. She was a principal. She's described as a social worker in her obituary. She was a club woman and she was a petitioner as she went to make sure that they had better fire protection and water, but also that they knew that this 10-cent charge might be a hindrance for some. So you can see all of those things. And I hope that maybe you have thought of some other things that I haven't listed here and that you have been able to find and to see who she was. So as we conclude this presentation, I want to go back to her own words. My field has been small in Norwood, but it has been plenty large enough for my abilities. At least I have spent my life for my race. And I would just add to that, she did all that she could do. Thank you.
That was amazing. We'll have some questions for Keisha in a little bit. I just wanted to comment quickly on what I've heard. I think I've got another word that we can add to the list, and I'm sure some of you probably do too. And that word is outlier, because I'm thinking what a phenomenal individual, especially in the late 1800s, the late 19th century. And so I don't assume that that was very typical for an African American woman to, first of all, see herself as someone who could have such an impact. It's as if she didn't know any boundaries and nothing stopped her. And so as I was sitting here, and I'm sharing from a personal perspective, as I was sitting here listening to you, you're taking us back in time, Keisha, and you're presenting this incredible individual who had such amazing impact. And I'm thinking of my children who would ask, well, what does that do for us today? And maybe our audience could be asking that same question. And for me, what it does, it inspires me. And I think that's the whole point of history. It educates, but it also inspires. If somebody like Ada B. Harris, living in her time with all the constraints, was able to go beyond what was possible in people's mind, what does that say for us living today? So thank you again. Phenomenal job. Thank you for the research you did. Thank you for this incredible presentation. Let's give a round of applause to Keisha, please. And so now we'll take a few minutes for questions. We know we have an online audience also. And so Miriam, you'll let us know if we have questions from the online audience. And for the audience here, we'll ask that you speak in the mic because we want people who are watching online to be able to listen to your questions. And then Keisha will answer the questions. So if you have a question in the audience, just raise your hand and then we'll give the mic.
Testing. Thank you, Keisha. It was really good, really good. So was she a Democrat?
So if you notice, okay, can I go back? So that was that was a question I had. So at one part it does says Democratic speakers, but if you look down, it does list Republican. So I think she may have been at different points. So I'm going to go backwards so I can. Oh, okay. I'll show you. Yes. So, okay. So let's see. The Republican state. So the Republican State Bureau announces meetings. So yeah, so as I look and I go to the research, so this was one of those where I had to stop myself and say, okay, was she? And so here, you know, it says Democratic women, and up above, we have the Democratic women, and then we break it down to Republican. So yeah, so my highlighting may have caused a little concern. But yes, you can see down here when it says here, oh, me and this right here. And then where they're going to have their Chautauqua and all those things. So, yeah. So I think there may have been at different times, maybe she had, but yes. Yes, yeah. And there's and then, oops. Sorry, I was going to go back to the last one where it's a little bit later. What year was that? I'll just point that out real quick. Okay, so let's see. Okay, and then this one is 1925, so a little bit later. And then it talks about the Democratic women and then the other committee members. So it has some changes and different things based on the newspaper articles. Okay, and thank you, Kaya. Yes.
Wonderful presentation, Keisha. But 1925, DC Stevenson was rising to the top with the Klan in Indiana, and primarily as a Republican. As Republican people were being put into office,
Yes.
And a lot of people were becoming Democrats. Such the party of Lincoln was no more like, well, we won't go into that.
And so you can see in the change in the early year to the 25.
But I have a question. Sometimes they called her in the paper Mrs.
Yes.
Is that just a
She was single. She was single her entire life. And I read it as it was presented in the paper, but she was a single woman.
And one other comment, as was said in the introduction, she was unknown, but she was very active. But she wasn't the only woman active. There were, and it's just a matter of how history has dismissed so many people. If we put all those people together, that's how the change was made. So wonderful presentation.
And I absolutely agree. Like I said, I was introduced to her by Miss Donna Stokes Lucas. Now, any of you know Miss Donna Stokes Lucas, you know that she has a wealth of knowledge and she's always sharing. And so she shared that story with me and I immediately go to look for her. And I just want to give again credit to the work that Dr. Erling Ray Ferguson was doing earlier. And then later, Dr. Darlene Clark High and just individuals, but Dr. Ferguson got her PhD from Indiana University. And so her articles happened to share a lot of information about the club women. And I will agree with you again. The club women of Indianapolis, if you remember on the slide with the Women's Improvement Club, Dr. Beulah Porter, Lillian Thomas Fox, who had started the Women's Improvement Club. She was a newspaper writer, but she was also very active in trying to improve the conditions of Blacks living in Indianapolis. I have an article about her where she is fighting against troubles that she's having on the train, and this is in like 1890s. So there were many women in Indianapolis who were working, who were definitely doing things. And there was a very strong club movement here. I will say, and this, if any of you are interested, so one of the things about her legacy is that next year we will be installing a Indiana historical marker, Indiana Historical Bureau marker for Miss Ada B. Harris. It's been approved, the text will be finalized, and it will be installed next year. But if you're really interested in getting a little bit more information about Miss Ada B. Harris, I wanted to be very careful of time tonight, given that we've had our first interesting night of the season, we'll put it that way. So I wanted to be very careful and not go too long, but Kelsey Green of the Indiana Historical Bureau has done a blog on Ada B. Harris, and then part 2 will be next week. So you can go to their blog. And what is great about the work that the Bureau does is that they're always putting footnotes. So yes, I tried to put all the citations in the presentation, but I haven't seen her blog, but I know it will be excellent and it'll have footnotes. And then that way you can go back, and if you want to look up some of these sources to be able to find more information, especially as it pertains to some of the other women that she's working with, because the Women's Improvement Club was indeed a club and it had many women. And so you'd be able to find more about these wonderful women who are doing work.
Hello, thank you. The presentation was awesome.
Thank you.
I have a comment and a question. I think one of the words that I would use for Mrs. Harris would also be strategist. Like she definitely utilized strategy in regards to what it is that she was doing, and it would seem like why she had to do it according to her will and testament, you know, like leaving at least just the language of that, at least I did something.
Yeah.
Right, like that part for me is just like, that is okay. I mean, like, can I go back and start over? You know what I'm saying? Like, so in that thought process, which leads me to my question, do you think that this could be duplicated in today's time?
Absolutely. Without hesitation. Yes, I absolutely do. You know, it's so interesting because I'm so inspired by her. I am just really inspired by her. I'm sorry. She has been a part of my life. And that first image that I showed, that space was opened in March of 2003. So I would have started researching and working on it in 2001. So she's been a part of my life for a very long time, and I'm still learning about her, and I still haven't learned everything that I need to know. But like you were asking that question, the inspiration that she gives to people now, I think it can be duplicated. And I think that there is someone out there who is going to do that work and to do that. And honestly, there are a lot of people who are doing that work and working together as groups and trying to move forward. But I think we're going to witness that. We're going to see that, and we're going to see how that was being done. And I think about other women. So we have this club movement during this time period, but there have been other moments when women have, I'm not going to say sacrifice, because I don't see the work that she was doing as a sacrifice for her. I think this was really what she was meant to do and what she wanted to do. I don't see it as a sacrifice, but there are times where you have the work of individuals. I'm going to specifically talk about women because of I'm talking about Ada B. Harris tonight, where they have done these incredible things so they can make a way happen. I think about the starting of the Alpha Home. I think about the women who said, we're going to make sure that we have a place that we can take care of the women who were former slaves. I think about individuals. So that's going back further and time and things. But then I think about an individual, you know what, I'll even use the person who helps me. I think about my mentors and all that they were able to do. And maybe they weren't able to bring about this whole idea of land and legacy, but what they left and the people that they helped train and support is far greater. I think about Miss Wimma Gibbs Moore. And I think about what she poured into me and that I'm able to stand in front of you all today and talk about. I think about individuals like her who have just really planted the seed. And so maybe it doesn't all come in one individual like Ada B. Harris did, but it comes in multiple individuals as we all seek to make our world just better. Yeah.
I asked that question because even the people that you named all were during the time period where it was segregation, right? So that was in thought process. I wonder, I just wondered in that possibility of or that hope that the work, it seems like the work that we're fighting for is, that work again, right? Like the Civil Rights Act of 65 is way, the current Civil Rights Act. And it seems like we're fighting this work over and over again. But I wonder if the capacity, the proximity of being with one another and that capacity changes the push. So
yeah, so that makes me proud because that was one of the things that, if it was a longer talk, I would talk about this whole idea of the people that she was surrounded herself with. I mean, at every article, you saw other individuals that you knew who were doing different things, who were business owners. I love that she emphasized this idea of that they were landowners and workers. I mean, it was all about uplift. This was not about, we are not here to not be about the work of getting things done. I mean, from H.L. Sanders to Archie Greathouse, to Dr. Porter, I keep going back to her, to Lillian Thomas Fox, everyone that she was around seemed to be also working. So she had a group of people who also were helping to move her forward. And she was just being able, so I think that whole idea of being a collaborator as well as worker and, having a strategy just really seemed to help her. And it made me think about, the whole idea of the company that you keep. And she's a perfect example of good company around her to help her accomplish things. Yeah.
Yes, was Norwood a school, a community, a neighborhood, or what?
I think it was all those things, but Norwood actually was a school. So there was Norwood, and it was like school number 5. And then that school became Norwood, Harriet Beecher Stowe. Sorry, I'm talking too fast. Harriet Beecher Stowe School number 64. And that was after the turn of the century. But first of all, it was the Norwood School, and then it became the Harriet Beecher Stowe School. And if you are really interested in a lot of information about Norwood, and I told Kayla I was going to do this, so there's a whole group of people who are actually right now researching and putting out the information about Norwood. You remember I talked about Norwood and Lovetown when she wanted to give the prayer, and so I did not know about Lovetown. I have learned about Lovetown through the work that they are doing to help bring about the information about Norwood. So if you want to know more about them, you can reach out to, they are under the name of the Southside United States Colored Troops Group. But Kayla Austin is one of the people who has been doing work, and they're trying to get a lot of information. And through her efforts, there have been some information that has been provided and put forth. But also, because again, going back, tell me to stop. When you're going back to the research, so how many are familiar with Digital Indy? So Digital Indy is part of the Indianapolis Public Library. So the beautiful thing about that is you can get a lot of information about the public schools. So the history books, the records from the school, there are some of them that have been digitized that are part of that record. So you can go into, and it's just Digital Indie. You can go into Digital Indie and you can type in her name, and then different things will come up. Now, I would probably say type in School 64, and then you can go back and get the history book, and it'll have the foundation, the history of the school there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. But it's closed. So it's Beth, I think it's now the name Bethel Park. It's closed now, but that's where it would have been. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for your questions and thank you for your answers, Keisha. I have a feeling that you would be okay if we extended this another hour, but we don't want to keep everyone here. And so as a reminder, everyone, well, thank you again for attending. As a reminder, please scan the QR code with your phone and fill out the quick survey. It gives us valuable feedback and we appreciate that. So wanted to thank you, Isha, once again for this amazing presentation. And so we would like once again to thank our sponsors for tonight, the Black Heritage Preservation Program at the Indiana Landmarks, Indiana Humanities, IU Indianapolis Africana Studies Department, and the Joseph Taylor branch of ESALA, and the Association of the Study of African American Life and History. We invite you once again to check our webpage at freetownvillage.org to learn more about other Freetown Village programs and events. This tonight was the last conversation of the series for 2024. So we're wrapping up the year with tonight's event, and we will begin again in February 2025. And I believe the date here is Thursday, February 20th. Right here at the Indiana Landmarks. So we would invite you to make a tax-deductible contribution and support of the fabulous work that we do at Freetown Village. And once again, if you haven't done so yet, please complete the evaluation by scanning the QR code. So thank you, everyone. Have a pleasant evening and safe ride home. Thank you again, Keisha.